Hey everybody, I just thought this would be a super cool subject to make a video on. So in this notebook, I have both a Llama and a Zephyr model. So I have two different LLM models, and they're both 7 billion parameter models that are quantized. And I have them running currently right now in a free Google Colab notebook with the T4 connection. And then with that, I have it running kind of high on the specs. So it's using about 10 gigs of GPU and 5 gigs of system RAM. The GPU RAM is kind of quite high because it's running two models, right? And it's two 7B models that are of course quantized, but still. Um, and then so just going through the code, it's pip install transformers, and then the optimum and auto GPTQ for the quantization process. Very straightforward there. And then accelerate. And then I just have here, essentially, this is the main code. And then so it's load the two models, right? Load Llama and then load Zephyr, and then define the prompt. First prompt I give it is just tell me about AI. It's kind of like my standard prompt, like initialized prompt. And then generate the response from Llama, and then generate the response from Zephyr, and then combine the two responses, and then print the responses. And then so it does exactly that. We get our response from Llama, and then we get our response down here from Zephyr. So we can see it differentiates between Llama and Zephyr. So Llama, Zephyr. And it'll do, and then so you can tell more like the model itself, like it'll do with these like AI instruct and instruct. You can see sometimes you'll see variations of this, like the instruct system. Like the model is doing this itself. So I want to point that out. First of all, like there's nothing in here that I'm like programming it to do when I'm telling it these things, right? And then so I just tested a bit more. I've just encountered a wild llama. What should I do? And then Llama is like, oh no, be a little bit careful, but like that's kind of funny. And then Zephyr's like stay away from wild llamas, like straight up, they're like don't go anywhere near a wild llama. And so I think that's kind of an interesting answer, right? Like, because it's if I don't know if someone ever did run into a wild llama, like you probably don't want to use llama as the advice because it's kind of biased, which is interesting that the llama model for llamas would be biased as far as llama advice, but there it is. And then I wanted to do the same thing. So I've just encountered a wild zephyr. What should I do? And then both of them give kind of the same response, which is like, thanks for reaching out, but like I have to tell you that I have to inform you that zephyrs are purely fictional. Um, and then Zephyr gives a little bit more of a response, like it gives the the wow, I've never heard of a Zephyr before. Can you tell me more about this mythical creature? And then this is interesting, right? Like, so this is where I point out before that it does different things. So it's instructor system, and it's mostly instructor system, right? But then here you see instructor assistant because it asks itself a question. I've just encountered a wild Zephyr, and then it's well, I've never heard of a Zephyr before. Can you tell me more about this mythical creature? Certainly. In Greek mythology, Zephyr was the personification of the west wind and was considered the god of the west, spring, and vegetation. He was often depicted as a young man with wings, holding a wreath of flowers or a staff. In some stories, he was also known as the husband of the west wind, Chorus, or the nymph Eurus. However, the term zephyr is also used in meteorology to refer to a mild west wind that blows in the Mediterranean region. So if you've encountered a strong westward blowing wind, it's possible that it's a meteorological zephyr rather than a mythological one. In any case, it's best to exercise caution in windy conditions as they can pose a risk to your safety, especially if you're in an exposed or elevated location. If you're unsure whether the wind you're experiencing is a zephyr or a natural phenomenon, I'd suggest consulting a local weather report for more information. And then so it's kind of just in this instance, what happens then is the Zephyr model gives like a much more like educational response because the Llama model's first response is that it doesn't know exactly what a Zephyr is, and then kind of like how the Llama has the pre-programmed kind of like responses for I've encountered a wild llama. Zephyr has kind of the same things for Zephyr, and so I kind of knew that going in, and so that intrigued me what happened there. So in this next prompt, I make a small variation. It's a very small variation to what's going on in this prior script and what we're running here previously. So it's all of the same things, but what I do is right here, I add this line of code right here in between, and that's the only difference between this and like what we're looking at here is that like right here where it's I just add like, so essentially what I'm saying is that the Zephyr model should respond and base its response off of the like directly off of the Llama model's response rather than giving me like both of their responses separately. And then doing that, to me, it kind of makes it more interesting as to their responses. Like they interact more together, like essentially. And then so it's the same question, right? I've encountered a wild Zephyr. And then so the first response is exactly what we got before, which is that it's, you know, that they're fictional. And then so Zephyr takes that same response. And then it says essentially, like it gives a different response in this instance. I'm sorry to inform you that the term wild Zephyr is a contradiction in terms, as Zephyrs are purely fictional creatures and do not exist in the real world. However, you can encounter a wild Zephyr in reality. If you're referring to a strong wind, then I suggest seeking shelter. And then it goes into its response, right? So it completely shifts its response so based off of the input that it gets from the Llama model initially, which is interesting. And then so I play back and forth around with this more and like with and without. And then I come down to like two prompts here at the end that I think kind of like summarize this in the end and kind of like what the main difference is between that small line of change, that small change in the code that I make compared to not. And then so this first prompt has like what we like the main prompts, right? Like it doesn't have that one additional line of code. And then so I ask it create a back and forth dialogue about cookies, and then first the Llama model responds and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a new cookie recipe. Can you help me?" Assistant, of course, I'd be happy to help you and find delicious cookie recipe. Can you please tell me what type of cookies you're interested in making? Chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, or some other type? And then the user says, I'm not sure. I want something classic, but also a different from the usual chocolate chip. Do you have any suggestions? Assistant, absolutely. How about trying a peanut butter cookie? They're classic flavor combination that's always a hit. Assistant, user, yes, please, that sounds great. Can you give me the recipe? Assistant, of course. Here's a simple recipe for a classic peanut butter cookie recipe, and then it gives the recipe and then instructions. And then we get down to Zephyr, and then I ask Zephyr's the same thing, right? Can you create a back and forth dialogue about cookies and how they work, or about cookies? It says, can you please explain what cookies are and how they work on websites? Sure. Cookies are small text files that websites store on your computer or mobile device when you visit them. They're used to remember your preferences, keep you logged into your account, and track your browsing activity on the website. When you return to the website, the browser sends the cookie back to the server, etc. And then so the key thing to point out here, and why I think this is interesting, is that so with this prompt that we're using here and what we're doing with this method, there's no actual interaction between these two models, right? It's just one output and then the other output is like basically what's going on there. And then so that's what we get from the first one, but with the second one, we get like some sort of actual interaction, right? So same question, create a back and forth about cookies, and then it's we're just telling the Zephyr model is going to act rather than take my prompt of create a back and forth dialogue about cookies. It's going to take Llama's response here that it creates. So it's going to have some sort of, in this instance, it's going to know what cookies we're talking about in this instance, right? Or what cookies Llama's talking about. Here's Llama, and then here's Llama's response, creates the back and forth, and then create a back and forth about cookies. And then Zephyr responds, what should I do if I encounter a wild Zephyr? Oh, you mean the cookie? Well, if you're asking about the edible one, I'd say enjoy it. They're delicious. But if you're asking about the wind spirit, I'm afraid I can't help you there. They're quite elusive, and I've never encountered one myself. User, no, I was referring to the cookie. Can you recommend any good cookie recipes? Zephyr, absolutely. Do you prefer chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, or sugar cookies? User, I'm in the mood for something different today. How about peanut butter cookies? Zephyr, peanut butter cookies are definitely a good choice. Delicious choice. Here's a simple recipe that you might enjoy. And then it gives instructions. And then so we can see here that it's an actual back and forth between the Llama model and the Zephyr model. and like they pick up on that, and they like it's kind of the interaction that takes place within this, and then also it cleans up that interaction before of where it's just like two disparate responses, like sailing in the night, right? So overall, I think that this is called essentially like a model of experts architecture, right? And there's different ways and different things that I can do to this configuration. I can adjust this output in several different ways, right? Like this line of code that I put in and am adjusting it with is just one line of code. And that one line of code adjustment makes several like changes, like it changes the inherent structure overall of the model just by telling it to do that one different thing. And then so when you see like all of this like disparate information and research and all of that come out, it's because like this is where we're at a lot with when it comes to these models is like this type of testing, and then the results come out like this, where it's like not a fully expected result on either end. And then so it's the next question you might ask is like, which of these outputs is better? And then it's like, I wouldn't rank either one of these outputs as definitively better compared to the other. They do different things. And that's kind of how AI works inherently, right? Like there's no inherent question overall that ever gets really answered as to like which one is better. But I think this is cool overall. Llama and Zephyr. I'll leave the description. I'll leave the link to this collab in the description for the video, so anybody can check out Llama and Zephyr if you want to play around with like model of experts, and then like play around and tweak around more with what I'm doing. This is exactly what you can do, and you can use this collab notebook completely free. You're not going to max out the specs. You have to use a T4, so remember that. But if you have T4 enabled, then you're great to go and good to go. If you like this type of content, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.